My name is Dan Laurent. That seems a little on the loud side, but my name is Dan Laurent. I'm part of the business development team of eMobility within Siemens. I handle about a 15-state area, and today we'll be talking about eMobility and the electrification of the transportation. So just to kind of break the ice here, how many people own an EV in the room? That's good. That's more than I thought. It could easily be zero. So how many people have seen the electric F-150? Are you aware of it? Well, not seen one, but just be aware of it. Yeah, so you're aware of it. Good. That's good. That's excellent. We have a very unique relationship with Ford, and we're doing their charger for them. So we're really proud of it. We've been working on it for a couple of years, and so if the volumes that I hear from them are true, then I bet you at least half of you, maybe in a year or two, could have one. So, but anyway, really growing quickly. So with that, yes, the wave is here of EVs. You name it, whether it's just automotive vehicles or pickups, things are just moving so quickly. So like I said, the F-150 is doing very, very well from the standpoint of orders and things like that. And like I said, if the volumes are to be believed, it's going to be a busy next year for a lot of people. But the pickups, I think, are where I'll kind of stress the power needs are going to be strained versus the automotive vehicles, cars, things like that, where I think right now we're probably okay within homes and most commercial applications and things like that. So why is this happening now? If you look at the first statement, there is vehicle batteries are now about 1/10 the cost. I'm blocking you guys, so I'm going to walk up here a little bit. So batteries are now 1/10 the price of what they used to be. So if a car back 10 years ago was $100,000, $50,000 could easily be the battery piece. Now that's $5,000. So that's a big, big deal. That's a big difference. We have battery plants now. Battery plants are the new oil, if you would. If you don't have a battery plant within your state or in the country, then you're in trouble. The European Union realized that here probably even just a year or two ago, and realized we have no battery plants, so now we're at the mercy of any other supplier. So now they're building those. So battery costs are definitely coming down, and technology is really taking over to optimize and reduce the costs and things like that. The other thing I think to point out on this slide is where we sit from the standpoint of just other countries and things like that. And this is not to say that we're behind or anything like that. It's with joy and excitement that I'm glad I'm picking it up there, because if it was up higher, I missed the wave. And we are all in the electrical business, whether we're distributors, contractors, consultants, and obviously a lot of end users as well. But I like that it's down there. I get to ride it all the way up, as we grow. So we have a whole industry, a whole transportation industry that's coming to our world, as I like to say. The world of kilowatts, kilowatt hours, amps, breakers, things like that, that's not gas and things like that. So it's really exciting. It's a great opportunity that we have to see this. So one of the things kicking in there is certainly the new infrastructure funding law. I could do a whole hour probably on this, and I know just enough to be dangerous, but there's 4 sections to it. There's grants for just all types of refueling, hydrogen included. So that's over a 5-year period. There's the low or no emissions buses. That's for transits predominantly. and then I'll kind of skip the Clean School Bus Program. That's very particular. School buses use typically a different type of charger or supply equipment in their design because they do want to do bi-directional, charge up the batteries, take the kids to school, and then they charge up again. It's like, you got all this battery storage, what are you going to do with it? And you put it back on the grid. So typically the buses come with those chargers. So that leaves really one of the definite areas to benefit from is the National Electric Vehicle Formula Program. So that's where the states are going to actually say, this is where the government's giving us some money, so now we're going to start putting all this charging equipment around different parts of the state. So each state has money to spend on this, and I want to say Pennsylvania's is 5th out of 50 states. So there's a chunk of money out there for that. So that's this program here, the National Electric Vehicle Formula Program. So states are going to be spending the money, and we can be there to take those orders. So what other areas of kickbacks and incentives are out there? PECO is just starting a program where, and it's obviously kind of hard to see on this print here, but PECO is starting a program where a parking space has a value, and they'll be able to rebate you that $2,000 or $3,000. There's also the driving PA forward. I think Pennsylvania's actually got some of the best incentives out there. It's really, there's a good chunk of money. Driving PA forward has level 2s. We'll talk about level 2s and level 3s and what those mean. But there's a bucket of money for level 2s, and there's a chunk of money for level 3s too, which are much more expensive products. So realize that's a website that you can go to. There's, again, multiple programs. The level 2 is $9 million over 5 years. They just keep putting money into it, and which is great. PECO, like I said, is a level 2 program. And then I'm sure you do work outside the state of Pennsylvania. If you have questions or want to know what incentives are available out there, there's something called Department of Energy Alternative Fuels Data Center. It's a fancy name for a website that tells you what programs are available in that area. And it can be utility programs, they can be semi-private, state level, things like that. And that's what you see in the upper right corner. So you just click on the state, and it'll say, here are the incentives. Some of it is for EVSE, which is another acronym. That's supply equipment or chargers. And then other areas, it's related to cars. So you'll be looking at the equipment incentives and things like that. Okay. So highly recommend that, and you'll receive a copy of this or have available to you a copy of this presentation. So those not necessarily taking notes or so. So finally, in the other driver of this in the marketplace is these destination locations. So these are sites where people obviously are stagnant or vehicles are just sitting there. And you talk about, obviously, office buildings, airports where you've dropped off your car for a period of time. And it can be also at schools where you're at a school or a university at that, during the day. But I think one of the other areas that I've seen that people forget about is state parks, golf courses, wineries, anywhere, amusement parks. Here we are at Hershey. Things where the car goes and it stays. It's just sitting there for 3 hours, 5 hours, enough to definitely charge. And I'll give you some rates of, hey, what kind of distances we get. So these are all destination locations. So just think outside the box, and those are certainly areas where there can be an opportunity. So, the bunch of different slides here at the beginning of the presentation are all questions that I continue to get sometimes. So how much more money or how much less money is doing, is charging an electric vehicle versus filling up my car with gas? And again, I'm not here to sell EVs. There's challenges, battery, they're not going to be suited for everything. But these are having an impact on this market and why things are growing so quickly. So when you look at, you know, I just picked a comparable two vehicles, and I bet everybody would love to pay $2.50 for gas. Yeah, this was surprisingly only not too far along ago. Yeah, maybe 3 weeks ago. But so, for example, that in itself is why I didn't change this. This is probably 9 months ago. Think how much gas prices change. They swing back and forth, especially related to things, you know, war and, you know, Ukraine and all that kind of stuff. That can have residual effects that we're not even involved with. You know, that has an impact. How, you know, when's the last time your electrical rate changed that much in a year? It doesn't. It's all regulated. Energy costs or electrical costs are pretty flat. And now, most charging is done in the home. I'd say, they say 80%, and yeah, and I believe it, it's that much. So here's an example of, you know, a tank, 405 miles of range, you know, et cetera, and it works out to 3 refuels for the distances and the mileage that I showed, that I have up there. So if it's 250, and maybe it's closer to 5, you're talking about $250. But on the electric motor or electric car, Tesla long range, you know, gets you a little more distance, so we're not having to refill as often, but we do have an extra refill in there. Now, again, 8 cents a kilowatt hour. I was just using the bulk energy number, not the distributed transmission lines and all that kind of stuff that are part of that. So you could easily bump that to 10 or 12 cents a kilowatt hour and probably be more applicable. But the point is, okay, so it goes to what, $25, $28 versus $250? This is driving some behavior as well, certainly. And then you have all these other, you know, don't have to maintain it. You have to go in for maintenance and oil changes and all that kind of stuff. So again, you'll have a copy of these. This is what your customers may ask. Say, hey, you know, am I going to save money? And for sure you will. Okay, so that being what's happening in the marketplace, let's talk about, okay, how do we charge these vehicles? And there's two predominant ways. There's really 2 ways of charging this equipment, or charging these vehicles. AC and DC charging. So I think a few things, this is one slide we'll stay on here for a few minutes. So the first thing is, notice the top line. It says electric vehicle supply equipment. So officially, that's what this equipment is called. We all like to call it a charger. On the AC side, it is literally supplying power from the utility, 208, through the product, 208, 240, again, still 208, 240, AC, into the car. The car does everything else. The car has, every electric vehicle has its own inverter on board. So it's like carrying your charger. You know the little white plugs you get with the Apple, you know, that converts from 120 to the 5 volts or whatever you need. It's like having that in your pocket with a little cord all the time. You're walking around and you park, you stop, you plug in. That's exactly the same kind of scenario. So you're simply, now in that scenario, it is AC, you know, it's conversion there. But in this case, the conversion and all the brain power is all in the vehicle. Okay, so AC charging is nice, but it is limited to how big that inverter is on the vehicle, right? If the automotive company says I can only put a 32 amp inverter, then that's all it's going to be on there, and it's a capacity. Is that the charger's fault? No, that was the automotive manufacturer's decision. Now, long-range vehicles, because they have bigger batteries, need bigger inverters. So try to guess what? The long-range vehicles, the bigger vehicles, are coming with inverters that are not 32 amps, but 40 or 48 amps. So when you talk to Mr. Smith or, you know, Ms. Jones and putting a charger in their home, my suggestion is you always go with the larger unit, go with the 48, because the vehicles and the batteries are only getting bigger and they're going to need that extra juice. They're going to need that power. So an AC charger is very simple. It's a control device, but it has several things that UL requires. So make sure when you buy your chargers, or see, I still call them a charger, that they're UL, which is the AC is fed by a standard breaker. So the AC charger has ground fault built in, short circuit, and also has under voltage conditions, and it communicates its circuit size to the vehicle. So it has a lot of necessary responsibilities. Okay, so the AC unit is going to be a little bit slower, but it's a simple device, right? I just described everything it needs to do, and it's very simple. So it's a slower charge in the grander scheme of things here. The other alternative is DC fast charging. So this is what we see near the highways. And so DC fast charging, we have not only AC in, which by the way is 480 volts only. Okay, there is no 240, there's no 208. The DC has 480 coming in and produces, and the inverter, I should say, is in our charging equipment. Now it produces somewhere between 100 and 800, actually I should say 950 volts DC to the batteries. Because now we're actually directly connected to the batteries. So with this system, we're charging much quicker, and we have, it's going to be a little more expensive because the equipment has more equipment in it, the inverter and those kind of things. Okay, so if we can move the picture, please. On the AC side, we call this a level 2. Okay, so you'll very often see in specifications and things like that, level 2 AC charger. So that's level 2, and a DC is level 3. Okay, so that's just how they're defined. All right. So obviously, if anybody has any questions, or I guess we take questions at the end. Either way, I'll take them whenever they come. So yes, go ahead. Great question. It's about to come up. So great lead. And after this one, I think, there we go.
I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Can the cars use either?
Great question. If you'd asked me 3 or 4 years ago, there was several vehicles in the marketplace. Nissan Leaf, for example, I think even the Chevy Bolt, only could accommodate AC charging. It did not have the DC fast charging capabilities, the connections, the brain power to handle that. They had their little inverter on board, the little Chevy Bolt or whatever. You just gave it AC, it kind of did its thing, and it's very slow. Or back then, the batteries were small enough so that it was okay. You could get it done in 2, 3, 4 hours, versus 8 hours in a typical. So to answer your question, so these numbers, for example, is this example up here. So if I have a battery that's 75 kilowatt hours in the car, and it goes from 15 to 80, and I want to take it from 15% state of charge, that's another term quite often used, from 15% to 80%, how long would it take? And what you see here is this is what's been around for about the last 10 years. This is your, hey, I got a charger. You probably remembered it's a 40 amp 2-pole, right? Just like a jacuzzi, maybe it was a 50 amp 2-pole and things like that. That 40 amp 2-pole produces 32 amps. That's going to give you, with this size battery, 7.5 hours. Not bad. That's good. It's overnight and within the 8 hours of an overnight stay, that kind of thing. We've obsoleted ours at Siemens, so 40 and 48 amp are the options we provide. We see, because of what we're seeing in the vehicles, we're seeing these amperages requested, and the cars can handle it. They want that. They want more power. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think that you will continue to increase level 2 charging capabilities above 11.5 kilowatts?
Yes, for sure. What's going to happen is level 2s officially max out at 80 amps at 240 volts, which is 19.2 kilowatts. So
there is an actual top.
from a level 2, there is a top limit. Now, at 19.2, which is 80 amps, your 80% rule, your breaker is going to be a 100 amp 2-pole. Now, how many homes, if you go into, are going to have room for a 100 amp 2-pole? Not many. Yeah, not a lot. My counterpart was doing a code seminar or workshop earlier, and he was mentioning, he said, yeah, you have to, if you change the service in any way, you now have to add surge protection, I think is now a code requirement. If they accept it, I think it's maybe a 2020 code. I don't know all the semantics of it, but he said that's an example where all of a sudden you go in with one thing and then it backs up to, okay, I got to increase your service. Okay, now I'm required to put in a surge, surge suppression. So yeah, it can stack on you. So we got 40 and 48s. Those have been right now what we see the cars coming out with. Now, I said cars. So the big doozy coming up is the pickups. And with the pickups, just for fun, how long would it take to charge that brand new F-150 on a 120 outlet? I'll see you in 2 days. True story, I drove more of a standard electric vehicle into town and into Cleveland for a trade show, and it was literally at midnight, and I said, all right, and I got to park this. I'd like to have charging somewhere. And the valet said, I'll give you the Tesla spot. And I was like, well, what's the Tesla spot? And he says, oh, it's right up front the ramp. He said, and there's a quad receptacle on the wall for you. I'm like, all right, so just a little quad. I plug in, locked the car, super nice guy. I said, thank you. And, and I went up to my room and opened up the app. By the way, all electric vehicles all have their app. You stay connected. You can see everything about it and you can change things, which is some of the more modern vehicles have that as well. I looked at it and it said, anybody want to guess when it said I'd be finished and ready at a full charge? No, it's worse than that. So it was midnight. It was midnight Tuesday, so like literally early Wednesday. Friday at 10. And I was like, well, thank goodness I had 20 or 30 miles range in it, and I just need another 30 or 40, which would be about a day or so. About a day. I walked to trade shows. It was close enough, but it was very funny to see that and go, wow, it's very far off. Can you imagine if it was the pickup? So I run these same numbers, but now with a 135 kilowatt hour battery, bigger batteries. So what are we going to do? So, now that 48 amp is just under that 7.6 hours. So that's pretty good. That's an overnight, and you're going from 15 to 80. Try to guess what the new F-150 Lightning charger that we're making for them is sized. It's the 80. It's 80 amp rated, but it is adjustable, just like our units that are down in our booth and display, charging the Volvo that you see down there if you guys have come by, and that's all adjustable. So I can set that charger at 32, 40, or 48, the ones that are in our booth. The Ford model, we can actually, there's a couple extra settings in there, so it gets us. I can dial it down so you're not having to redo the panel. So you want that flexibility. That's definitely a feature you want if you're going to go out and start quoting or installing these. You can say, hey, I get out there and the circuit and the panel can handle it. If not, I can dial it back. And if you want to see where that is, we have one of our units opened up for installation purposes. So if you come by, you can see that. So I think this is the kind of thing that I like to scare consultants, and I've had a couple of things, a couple of meetings with customers that this really surprises them. A guy, multi-developer, saying I'm going to do a commercial property, and I'm going to have the utility do this, and then I have another utility doing the 2,000 or 3,000 homes that are going to be next to the shopping and the office and mixed use, and told him the news about this pickup, and he says, "Oh my gosh!" He says, "Once the first guy has one in the neighborhood," says, "you know, all of a sudden it's going to be across the whole neighborhood. Instead of having 200 amps per panel per house, I should say, it's going to be. We're going to have to size this for 300. Now take that times 2,000 or 3,000 homes. So that's the kind of discussion. Okay, we got to go back to the drawing board and talk to the utility, new service, things like that. So I think that's the thing. Maybe the takeaway is what type of vehicle, what size charger it is, that kind of thing, and just being prepared. So with the remaining time we have here, we're going to talk a little bit about our products, and just these are are very similar to certainly others, and so you should get a good idea of some of the capabilities you can get out of charging today. So I'm going to not focus so much on the fast charging. If you want to talk about that, come see me. On the heavy duties, this is typically for transit buses. We don't see typically, unless you're from a transit authority and then you're interested and you're a decision maker here, then we can certainly talk about this. But let's go with the basic product. So our product, notice they do look similar. The enclosures are the same from the standpoint of weatherproofness. They're NEMA 4. We even have it go through a salt spray test, which is nice. It's a nice enclosure. The 2 amperages we've already talked about a little bit, 40 and 48. So with the residential, the biggest difference is there's no RFID card. It's always unlocked, right? It's going to be in someone's garage most likely, or a carport, or that kind of thing. So someone just pulls up, they plug in, they don't need it locked. If you want to get it locked, then you go with the commercial models where we use our RFID cards, and that the unit's locked and you scan it and then it unlocks. It allows you to charge the vehicle. So all of our units have Wi-Fi communications, and all of them have hardwired as well. And why is that? Just like your phone is connected to obviously to the cellular network, the units need their internet connection for over the what they call OTA, over the air updates. So just like you have your Apple phone, Apple takes care of that Apple phone for you, but it doesn't do your service every day, right? That's AT&T, T-Mobile, things like that. Think of Siemens in the same role with these chargers. So the chargers we have are communicated to. We keep track of them if you put them on the network. If there's an update, then we update them. That's really nice. But do we manage the billing and all that kind of stuff? No, there are companies that do that, and I'll touch on that here at the end. So, all right, so that's the Resi unit. The child and parent, just what marketing came up with as names, not my favorites, but anyway, this is essentially our advanced Wi-Fi unit. It has, like I said, Wi-Fi, Ethernet, hardwired connections. It's got the RFID cards. It's got data logging. It's all of our products that you see here are all metering capable. So they meter on board, ANSI revenue accurate, which is important. Utilities require it. But one of the other things, sorry for a lot of acronyms here, but is this OCPP. If you're going to see it here listed a couple of times, it is the protocol that is necessary, is needed for our equipment to talk to the cloud and talk to these service providers. And so if you don't have that, you're not going to be doing billing, you're not going to be doing anything, management, load management, things like that. All right. And then one other product we have on the commercial side is a parent model, and what is that? Is that unit has a cell modem built in. So if you're not sure about the Wi-Fi, you're not sure about Ethernet and how you're going to get this unit on the internet, the unit with the cellular modem is available. So yeah, go ahead.
Can your residential unit do circuit sharing?
Circuit sharing, like explain just.
One feed, 30 amps to share between, 50 amps to share between 2 units.
To be able to No, we don't do that today. Yes, yeah, load sharing, exactly. So one circuit, no. Oops, I recognize that. That's my apologies. No, we have, for right now, one circuit is dedicated for each charger. So yeah, there's some functionality that we're looking at for the parent that would be able to do definitely load management, but each would have their own circuit feed for that. So yeah.
With the commercial ones, is there anything with that cloud network or that cell modem or Ethernet connection where maybe like Waze or Google Maps or something is letting these EVs know, like, hey, there's a charger here, you can connect to it?
Yes, the EVSP, Electric Vehicle Service Provider, it does have that role to be able to share, if the owner wants, to share that charger in a public manner so that anybody who's driving nearby says, oh my gosh, I'm like in my situation when I pulled into Cleveland, you know, it would have been nice to see, and I did. I pulled up Plug Share as an example of one of the more popular websites to be able to say, okay, yeah, here's, you know, these units at this place, or okay, this parking garage has got some level 2s and, you know, that kind of thing. So absolutely. And a lot of property owners don't want it advertised, so they just, you know, it's theirs, or they're specifically for a particular tenant. You're my tenant in my building, you say, hey, I want 4 chargers, they're going to be off of my circuits, off of my floor, then I don't want anybody, especially Dan, showing up in the evening, you know, charging his vehicle off that. And so that's why we typically see the commercial and the RFID cards being used and that kind of thing. Good questions. Good questions. Yeah.
If we would say purchase like 3 of them today, and we want to add more later, is there a way to manage that? They integrate that information together in one facility. That way you can specify what you would like, and then you build upon that because you know it works.
Yeah. That's actually one of the things I usually tell people is that when you go to pick your charger manufacturer or charger model, you know, it should be flexible enough to grow with the owner. And what I'm seeing is that a lot of times owners are buying these because they know it's the right thing to do, number one. Or number two, those incentives I mentioned, if they don't grab them now, they're not going to be around in another year or 2 or 3 or whatever. Now that's probably not the case because you got the government, you know, spending some money on that. But those incentives could be gone. So initially these chargers should be free, but then as they get using more energy, then they say, all right, well, you know, no more free. I want to keep it restricted to my employees. Maybe it's in an open space and that kind of thing. So you use the RFID cards. Or you make the decision, like I have one customer, and they have RFID cards, but they also want, at the same time, if I come up and I'm a guest, and they say, oh, no, it's free for you, Dan, but then Bob shows up, and you know, he is some stranger, then we want him to use a credit card reader and use a credit card to pay for his, you know, his usage. You can do that. Off of one QR code with one service provider, you can have that flexibility to have a fleet vehicle or an employee or something like that at the same time as you have, or you do billing. So yeah, they can start with 3 or 4, and then they can grow, and they can go in multiple sites as well.
I'm just thinking for the reporting requirements that are down the road, that now you can
Aggregate all that information. Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, yes, sir.
Units that you're building, are you building with the dual plugs? Because Tesla uses one and Mitsubishi i4 uses it.
Yeah, so exactly. Yeah, so with this right now is just a level 2 AC. With AC, they're all the same, J1772. That's the, and I kind of skipped that slide. I apologize there. But the Teslas have a little adapter. Every Tesla is you know, sent out with one of these adapters. It plugs into the Tesla side, and on the other side is a J1772. And because this is very simple AC power, it's just a few pins. There's no navigating, battery management, or something like that that you have with a DC fast charge. So these, father-in-law, son-in-law, when they bring their Teslas over, I plug right into them, no problem. You know, they just owe me a beer. So, you know, when they plug in, use my electricity. So yeah, that's all been kind of ironed out on the AC side. Unfortunately for DC fast charging, there's the Tesla network, and then there's Electrify America and the rest of us, I guess, that kind of thing. So, all right. I think, yeah, so this just has a few more bullet points, and I won't belabor this because I think there's some better pictures and images here. So options. So these chargers you'll see, like the one that we have on display today up in the trade show, is post mounted. So that's one of the options here, is an aluminum post. Real nice. You can feed 2 chargers kind of through that one pipe, and you can actually have 2 chargers back to back. We can add on cable retractors if you like. They just bolt kind of on the other sides of the units, and you put one for each of the sets of the cable. My apologies, guys. So, you can certainly always wall mount it. And then if you're curious, there's just more examples. So this is our new combination post and cable retractor all in one. So that's coming out, and so we're excited for that. This is another example where just 2 installed, no cable retractor, just kind of more low key, you know, at the same height as the bushes and all that kind of stuff. And you know, large installations in parking garages, just, you know, wall mounting. And I think the thing to take away from this is just a small boutique hotel that's on the Eastern Shore there in Maryland, and they didn't want our post. You know, they had a carpenter on site who was doing all the custom carpentry for the hotel, and they built their own, you know, station, if you would. So there's just about any way you can think to mount these, people do. So yes, sir. Go ahead. Yep. This, or yeah, that one over there. Right now, given the price point for you know, for the chargers, they are fully, you have to replace the whole thing, especially if it like related to the coupler cable. I was explaining this actually up. I can point to it at our booth, all the equipment and the points and things like that that are connected. It's pretty tricky, and UL requires us that we do that in our factory. So that's an explanation of why I can't sell just a coupler and cable. Otherwise, yes, admittedly, in my pictures here, none show bolsters or whatever, bollards. Thank you, I appreciate that. Yes, bollards. A lot of times I see typically curb, you know, small curbs and that kind of stuff added to the parking space. So actually, I've got some more pictures, and there's always, I can throw lots of pictures of these installations, but there's a lot of flexibility. Yes, I saw some other hands, yes.
How's this going to affect the grid if you do 20 houses that are connected, everybody gets one in? Now you're talking transformers, you're talking, they tell you to back off on your air conditioning, everybody cranks up their AC one night, they plug in their car, boom.
Yeah.
So how they kind of...
The utilities are definitely coming to us for, you know, with questions about, you know, loading. You know, they're looking at expanding certainly their grid and support and that kind of stuff. So unfortunately, I'm so big. Yeah, and though. I guess I would say that as an example, and I'm just going to pick, you know, Pittsburgh as an example specifically because of the steel industry. That was their backbone, and they had all those facilities there using megawatts of power. I've heard the phrase that, you know, that Pittsburgh's got some good bones on it, you know, that it's got a lot of infrastructure there that it's not nearly, I mean, you go in Pittsburgh today and there's, where are the steel mills? All of them, you know, some that were miles long are just gone. And they were using 250, you know, megawatts. I mean, there's huge amounts of power. So, but that's certainly not most locations, certainly not maybe even neighborhoods. Yep. Absolutely.
10 miles,
yep.
you got farms that were in the community.
Totally agree. No, I agree. Yeah, and so I think that's the utility. I think it's where the utility is going to be, definitely having to do upgrades and things like that. Yeah, right now I've got so much on my plate. I haven't gotten to that one necessarily, but we do have individuals that work with utilities and things like that. I think what I see the utilities doing is collecting information. So some of the rebate programs, when they say, okay, Dan, if you put in the charger in your house, I'll pay you $1,000 to put that charger in, and you in return for that $1,000, you're going to send me data for 3 years. So I know when you're using it, how I'm using it, length of time, things like that. And I think it's so really in the future, these chargers are going to be controlled by the utility. And we can do that now, but they're more expensive, but they're more the commercial models. So yeah, I saw two hands. Sorry, go ahead. Yep.
So along those lines, the communication bidirectionally from the charger to the utility and having the utility control it, how soon do you think those programs are coming out? And you say
Oh, they are now. They're available today. Absolutely. Absolutely.
At the residential level?
Yeah, with these chargers, yes. Absolutely. Yeah. But I think utilities have to do their stuff on their SCADA systems and the software. But yeah, they'll be able to say, I want this whole section of, maybe 300, 500, 1,000 chargers that are in these homes. They do it with AC, right? Does everybody have that kind of stuff with your AC unit? I know BG&E in my area, it's 100 degrees. They go, we're going on the energy savings day, and all of a sudden my AC unit's only cycling like 25% of the time instead of 100% of the time. That same technology will tie into this, and so you can say, I want all chargers off right now. I can't handle it. Turn them off, or go to 10%.
It's bidirectional on the power side as well as the signal to turn on?
No, it's going to be predominantly communications. Yeah. Ford right now, and what we've done with Ford is a true bidirectional power backfeeding the house. And again, you've seen all the commercials and things like that. And we're in the final testing. Everything's fantastic, and it's amazing to watch. So it's more than just a charger on the wall. There's an inverter, and there's several other components and pieces, and but it's impressive. So. All right, so, I'm sorry, yes?
What type of solar system could you put for that? I mean, what would it require?
For like the bidirectional?
Well,
If
you install one of these charging
sure.
stations, what kind of solar system could you put to feed that?
You could have, from my knowledge of solar, which is not extensive, but you could have the solar panels feeding your critical circuits and the feeding inverter, and battery. So so it switches back and forth. So the solar, if you don't need the power, it kind of diverts it to the batteries that are there on station, so to speak. But otherwise, then it would, if you had load on that panel, your critical loads, you'd tie the charger to that critical load, is what I was going to say. Sorry?
Independent station separate from the grid.
Not attached to the grid, he's saying.
Off-grid.
Well, there's very few off-grid systems. That's the problem. You cannot run in most residential systems. You can't have just an inverter and solar panels and go. They need utility power as a reference for the frequency, 60 hertz. That I know. So that's typically how those systems get installed. Now, you can set it up where you say, I want 0 from the utility, and if it's a nice sunny day, I'm going to feed my critical circuits, which could be a few receptacles in the house, and my charger for the car, and it could do that. But it still and you would say, I'm using 0 from the utility, but it needs it for a reference. So that's part of the connections. I just know that. Yeah.
So has there been much thought, because like the farther down the road we get with technology that's faster, and how steep progressive climb gets in terms of how much better technologies get. Like if you look at a Milwaukee battery
Yeah.
5 years down the road, maybe they totally need all new equipment, and you just put all this investment into all, say you buy, like
Sure.
you look at multiple real estate properties, you want one per property, and you got 100 different properties or 100 different systems.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I take away from, when I think about, the speed of which batteries are changing, an amp's an amp, power's power, I think what you're going to see is, I mean, even today, I can take any vehicle, any EV vehicle, and plug it into a charger from 10 years ago. And it may be small, it may be 3.5 amps or 5 amps or 7 amps or something like that, or pardon me, kilowatts, I meant by those numbers. But, I see that as not going away. I mean, that compatibility, that capability to be able to charge at whatever rate as a minimum what used to be. So I do see batteries definitely changing and improving. I was talking to someone here today. They said, "Yeah, did you hear about the guys up in Michigan?" And they had come out with a new battery and they put it into a vehicle and got like 800 miles out of it. I'm like, no, I hadn't heard that. So I think the technologies are going to continue. I think battery technology is definitely just going to continue to grow and grow.
I was just curious because of how proprietary with the UL listings and stuff you're talking about, how like if somebody needs additional circuits in the panel today, we can just go in and work on them.
Yeah, no, I guess I don't. It's still going to be electrical circuit, that kind of stuff. And
I think it would stink to have to throw a whole $1,000 system away just to upgrade the technology. That's all.
yeah, no, in the end, we still make the basic charger that's still just when you plug it in, it gives it voltage. And from an AC standpoint, I think DC, that's a whole nother conversation, and we haven't talked about that specifically. So, sorry guys. Here. All right, so to try to wrap things up, I think here pretty soon. I think the thing to take away from this slide is, okay, why do I want to get my chargers on the network? Because I need to be able to update them with updates and changes and things like that. But also, if I'm going to do any billing or any load management, I got to get them on the internet. So one of the options is Wi-Fi communications. We could easily have an Ethernet Cat6 to each one of these units. So when you're running your cable, you can do that. Another neat solution we have with our parent, we can run an Ethernet wire out to it, and then we change this Wi-Fi to be a hotspot, just like a hotspot on your cell phone. So that's real simple and real nice to work with. We can only do typically a few units, less. We have 9 or less. Just depends on distance and things like that. And then we have our, like I said, the cellular modem capabilities, and we can certainly do the same hotspot, but then now we go out through a cell modem. So, and that's the case there. We've kind of talked about the building impact a little bit, but I think that's where we're seeing the next growth here is you're putting all these chargers out there in the parking lot of a building, and just using 11.5 as an example, you add 100 kilowatts. How are you managing that? How, if at all? And most property owners are not managing it. So what do? A building management system is a good way to go, or we actually have the capabilities through our EVSE, or Electric Vehicle Service Provider, to be able to do load management. So I'm going to skip this to get to the last section here. So software. So we have all these chargers. We've mounted them the way we like. We have no problems maybe with the panel board or the load center or whatever feeding it. So now the customer says, well, I want to be able to do maybe some load management, or I need to do the billing. That's the most common question, is how do I bill, the usage? So in that regard, that's what an EVSP does. Electric Vehicle Service Provider, an EVSP, fills this role. Owners need assistance in this. Sometimes we need assistance in this, right? So owners need assistance in the tools to manage this. You know, they got these chargers. Okay, at first it's at one site, but what if they have maybe 20 and they have 2 or 3 at multiple properties? So that's where an EVSP handles that role. So on a yearly basis, we can charge a fee to be able to see that charger, manage it, turn it on or off, reset it, track the events, all the charging events and things like that. So we have 3 levels, and this is again pretty typical of most manufacturers, that if they have the capabilities, they'll do very similar abilities as far as charging and charging being billing, and then load control. So, but I think the thing that we offer that's really nice is that we can use just about anybody's system. So there's a lot of EVSPs out there. They don't make chargers. They only have maybe 15, 20 people in their company. And so their company's called like Green Lots, which was bought by Shell Oil. Think about what they were thinking when they did that. EV Connect, Amp Up. It turns out there's an Amp Up and an Amped Up with an ED in there. So, but these are just 3 or 4 that I know that we've worked with, and they all do very similar things. They have QR codes, these are QR stickers that we stick on the units. Now with a little bit of instructions, driver just scans it and it takes them to the website, put in your credit card, and you're done. It's very, very straightforward. There's no reason to have a credit card reader out here. It can be ripped off, it can be steal credit cards. You have to power it up. It can fail. All of those kind of scenarios. This QR sticker, you can get a sticker. You can even get plates now, steel that have no problem. But all of that's right here, and there's obviously some additional capabilities. Yeah, yeah.
How secure is the Wi-Fi and websites and stuff on that? Because you know there's
Yep.
that going on.
Yep. So great question. So this is a clarification let's make sure we all understand. The Wi-Fi communications, or the connection that I'm making, that protocol OCPP, that connection I'm making to the charger has no financial information and no personal information in it. It is a management network. It allows me to manage this thing out there. So I have a serial number for it. I can turn it on, I can turn it off, I can update it, I can track how much energy it's using, I can see when it starts and stops, but nothing about Dan Laurent, what car he drives, his credit card, any of that financial. That is between a phone and the cloud, which the phone meets, was it PCI, the PCI standard? That's the banking standard. That's why we pull out our phones and just go, when we buy stuff. That's banks level security is in the phone. So let's take advantage of that and keep that separate. So that's why when IT guys go, what are you doing Wi-Fi on my network? And it's like, no, there's no financial on that. So once I explain that to an IT person, they're like, good, yeah, better. So, but OCPP has its own security as well. So we only manage it, or I say, hey, Green Lots, you're managing this. They lock in. They've got it from there. So great question. So owners can decide how much they want to charge. They can charge whatever they like. I've seen customers go the full spectrum. One down in North Carolina just said, well, we pay 6 cents a kilowatt hour. We'll charge 12. It's like, okay. And others I've seen, they pay 12 and they said, let's 50 cents. And a $2 connection fee. And I'm like, okay. And so you can do connection fees, transaction fees, things like that. So.
All those prices there, they're going to rise within 5, 10 years.
I'm sure. Pay me now or pay. Yeah.
It's just going to turn out how it is now.
Yeah. Do you think? Yeah. Do you think it's? Yeah. Well, as the batteries get bigger,
Taxis were put on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, there's way to catch it one way or the other for sure. So, I guess the thing to take away here is, There's different capabilities, you know, at the charger level. Be aware of that. Make sure the features and the functions meet your immediate needs. Think about what ask the customer where they're going to go in the future with that. So we have that capability of just, you know, Schaedler can order hardware pieces as well as add on these service providing right onto the bill of material and right into the project. So the biggest question you have to deal with, other than is the mounting and the amperage and that kind of thing, is how do you want to communicate to these things? Do you want me to run an Ethernet wire to it, or do you want me to we're going to do Wi-Fi or whatever in that kind of situation? We have specs online. We have even the bar chart with the cars and the amount of time. That's out online in the speed facts. We are the last section of the speed facts, section 19. So that's available. We have a great website with videos, instructional videos, how to install the equipment, how to program it, all that stuff. So I know I saw a couple more hands up, I thought. Yes? The best thing to do is probably talk to your Schaedler gentleman. That's the politically correct. I'll give you a range. You know, it can be anywhere just a little, maybe just south of $1,000, all the way up to just probably short of $2,000. That's just range, give or take. And obviously, there's competitors out there that are Chinese made, and there's others that do this. Just be careful about UL, ground fault protection, all of these things. Try to guess the ground fault protection we have in ours. You know, it's the same type of ground fault made in the same factory that does arc fault and ground fault breakers for your Siemens panel boards. So it's the same people, the same engineers. So that's why people like, yeah, I know that brand. So, you know, they go that way. So cool. All right, that's pretty much it. Thank you for, yeah, I answer. Yeah.
How far out would you say wireless charging is, or like electric vehicle?
Very, very close. Yeah, closer than you think, probably.